My name is Mary C. Leto. I grew up on Long Island, New York. I was born in the city, in Queens. My parents are from Brooklyn, but I lived out on Long Island in rather a rustic area back then. I spent almost all of my time in the woods, playing outdoors, and I knew almost from the moment I had a thought that I would be creating something for the rest of my life. I just knew I was an artist always. There was no question about it. I always had a pencil or a crayon in my hand, but I was always in the woods. I loved picking blackberries. I loved walking next to a little stream that was near my house. My parents were horrified by my constant wanting to be in nature. I had 5 younger sisters. The house is very crowded. So I enjoyed my alone time. I liked the solitude of walking in the woods. One book in particular that I came across years and years ago, and this is long before I ever made paper or before I ever made a book. I came across this, it's called Little Journeys by Elbert Hubbard and the Roycrofters. And I picked it up in a used bookstore, but when I opened it, it took my breath away. The paper is just magnificent, but the print and each, the illustrations and the care and the craftsmanship and the beauty. Little Journeys, it's about artists. So Elbert Hubbard wrote this book about Whistler, and there's a whole series of books, but it's bound beautifully. It's just absolutely almost made me shake. And it was published in 1902. You know, I wasn't really thinking about books other than I love them, but this particular book was absolutely held me spellbound. And now, just talking, I'm realizing that this is the effect that this book had on me is the effect I'd like to have on others when I create my books. So I do put a lot of care and time into creating my books. Many times it just starts with laying in bed at night and thinking, and ideas come to me. They don't always work out the way I see them, but I try to create what I envision in my mind. And actually, that is what I find most rewarding about being an artist, is that I can think something and then recreate it. And it's that act of recreating a vision that I find myself in that so-called art zone. And once the piece is completed, it's not as meaningful to me anymore. I have the series called Concrete Illusions. They're giant blocks of cement that look like a building blown apart. Looks like rubble. But actually each cement piece is made with paper. And it's very light, and on a wall it looks like you have a giant block of cement hanging off of a wall. And I love these sculptures because the idea behind it is that you have to pull things apart, break things open to find your inner strength. And you constantly have to renew. And some of your old ideas you may have to pull apart, go in a new direction, but somehow you find a strength when you take things apart. Okay, some of the topics that I've felt worthy of all of my energy and pulling together all of my resources would be, maybe an article I read in a magazine or a newspaper, and it just kind of starts to develop, and I wonder about it. For instance, Hart Island, which is a potter's field. It's been a potter's field in New York City for more than 100 years. It goes back to the 1800s. And babies by the thousands were buried there. Poor families that couldn't bury their children buried their babies there. And people that couldn't afford funerals gave over their loved ones to be boxed up and put in the ground in stacks over on this island called Hart Island. And that just gelled, and I just thought about that and thought about it and thought about it, and finally I created a piece to try to portray my feeling. I'm a collector. I collect an awful lot of things. A little bit short of a hoarder, I think. I love buttons. I love bottles. I collect bottles and I collect buttons. And I thought, rather than be so dark all the time with cement pieces and grave sites, I thought I would do something with my buttons. And I have been trying to think of some kind of a button book to make for a very long time. And then I came up with this idea, Button Myths and Tales. But I wanted it a book that you could stretch out and view the entire book at the same time. You didn't have to turn pages. That you could just open it up and set it up and you could view the whole book. And my mother used to tell us stories and myths and just little things. And I remember that she used to talk about when you'd pass by a cemetery, if you didn't hold on to your buttons, the dead would take you. And now, once I found paper, and the way I make paper is that I gather plants and I gather from the woods. I gather all sorts of fiber. So I found an excuse to be back in the woods. It might not always be the woods. It might be a field. It might be the beachfront. I've been making paper. I'm new here. I live in South Carolina now. I'm very new to this area, the Low Country. It's very different than Long Island. But I found salt marshes, and I found the grasses, the spartina that grow in the salt marshes, make a very nice paper. So now I spend time when I can stomping around in salt marshes instead of the woods. I believe you should be able to touch a book, but there's something about the structure of a book. It's multi-leveled, multi-paged. The structure was created hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Not much has changed. And this again is as a bibliophile, as someone who just loves all books, I find the most beautiful books are the ones that are most comfortable in my hand. As a book artist and paper artist, I feel equal to all types of artists. I don't feel invisible. I feel my book more or less speaks for me, but I don't feel that my books are feminine or speak to a feminist movement or anything like that. I believe I feel an equality in hand bookmaking and artist books. Generally, when I come upon a piece, I'm looking at the work itself. And I would hope that that's what most people are looking at my work too. I'd rather be behind the scenes, not known, not seen. Just look at my work. If you like my work, I'm thrilled. You don't have to know anything about me. You don't have to try to figure me out. And I'm not trying to be out there and push myself. I just want my work to speak for itself.